here's something I've been reflecting. I'm not sure if any of you know Andres Duaney, who's an urbanist, architect, does a lot of city urban planning and so on. And I recently watched a video and he was commenting on the city of New York. So it's interesting to think of the relative carbon footprint, because in some ways we think the city of New York is perhaps the most urbanized space in North America, the biggest city, the most city of any city, if I can put it that way. And his comment was really interesting because he challenged my thinking. When we design cities today, we worry about protecting the natural spaces that are inherent to the community. We think about density and so on and so forth. And his comment was that we would never allow New York to occur today. The planning system would not allow New York to occur because and a comment he was getting at is New York, all of the rivers are underground. There's essentially one giant bulldozer effect. And what we end up with is an urban space that perhaps, and you can challenge this, that perhaps has the smallest carbon footprint of any urban space in North America. Which is an interesting way for us to think about it, right? We design things to protect things, but in that process we spread cities out, we create lower densities, we tend not to do the kinds of things that New York does well, like transit, high densities, the implications of that. So for me it challenged my thinking, because I would be one of those people that said, no, we have to protect those natural spaces. So I just open it up to you because it would imply that that high urban density is perhaps a much more sustainable city than I live in a farm in rural Ontario, right? And my children, we would make more than one trip on a given day. We can usually make a couple of trips into town for various purposes because of where I live and the connection. So, I just opened up for your comments. Anybody want to comment on it?
It's kind of an interesting perspective because urban geographers differentiate quite clearly between dense urban environments like New York, which in many cases are quite sustainable, because they have mass transit systems, the pollution is well managed, at least we feel it's well managed and well contained, and we contrast that with suburbia, and particularly the exurbs, and we see both the suburbs and the exurbs, both in popular imagination and in academic literature, as being highly unsustainable urban environments, partly because of commuting, partly because of the need to provide infrastructure. The current infrastructure technologies we have don't seem to work very efficiently in suburbia. They seem to generate a lot of negative externalities. And of course there are the questions of social sustainability, particularly in the US.
Thank you. Anybody want to add anything else to that? Karen?
Yeah, the notion of increasing density is often works against our American idealism of having lots of space around us. The country in the city, if you like, where we have our house like a large area. Again, Michael Coleman talking about the ideal for lawn. I had relatives in Holland, and a couple people visited this summer. They drove around Southern Ontario, and they said, Canadians like to mow. It's a very peculiar activity. And we give up so much space to the lawn. We expect that space to be there. The Netherlands, Amsterdam, cities in the Netherlands are extremely dense environments, high density. They also have more green space per capita than we do in our cities, which is not something we tend to link together, but it's the way they design, it's the individual expectations of how much space do I need, how much lawn do I need to mow. I've done a lot of design work in rural areas, doing large rural properties, and it's amazing how people will fight tooth and nail to keep that lawn so they can mow it. It's what they want to do. And so there's this strange cultural construct. Is just one example of how we need to shift our culture into understanding what our value systems are resulting in terms of the landscapes we live in. So I think it's possible to live much more densely, to live very happily in that density, and to also have access to nature and green space.
Thank you.
I think it's interesting when you consider urbanization generally, especially in the North American context. As we get denser, it actually does get more efficient on a per capita basis. You know, for the person in New York or San Francisco or downtown Toronto even, the amount you have to spend to provide them with water, the amount that it takes to heat their house in the winter, for example, goes down substantially compared to out in the suburbs, or even out in the countryside, the way we live. Now, that's not to say it doesn't take a lot to keep a city like New York going. I mean, some of the largest, most impressive tunnels in the world are New York City's water supply tunnels. Almost 100 miles underground. I mean, it's one of those great engineering feats that no one ever sees because no one ever travels through a water tunnel. So maybe what I'd say is, I think there's potential in these other landscapes to live extremely, much more environmentally benignly than in a city like New York, or at least somewhat. So if you're in New York, you have a built-in amount of carbon footprint, essentially. Just the supply of your water, your food, the removal of your waste takes energy, and that creates an environmental footprint. And no matter how you choose to live in New York, you still have that part of your footprint. Now, potentially out on the farm, you can actually reduce yourself to much lower than that. Going back to the example, say, the old order Mennonites. But it's a very different lifestyle. I mean, you don't plan on going anywhere that you can't travel to a few miles away. You have a very close-knit community. I actually would think the suburbs have a lot of potential. You know, if we took all that lawn and we actually redesigned it to be productive, useful space, you could actually produce a decent amount of food, fuel, especially the high-value nutritional food, for example, that is the most expensive to produce and deliver to you. So I think in some sense, there's some missed opportunities in the suburbs and our less dense cities. But it sort of depends. Do we want to live as we possibly could, or do we want to live the way we're used to? And arguably, we can't keep living the way we're used to. We probably all don't want to go back to having a horse and cutting firewood with axes and saws. And we've gotten used to being comfortable. But I think in each of these places, we can reinvent how we do it.
That's great, thank you very much. There's a little anecdote that I find interesting along that line. I was at a conference in Kansas City 2 or 3 years ago, and it was the mayor of Kansas City speaking. He was comparing Kansas City with the city of San Francisco. And I've not checked these statistics, but I believe given the source, they're probably reasonably accurate. The population of Kansas City and the population of San Francisco were essentially the same. The footprint of Kansas City relative to San Francisco was 43 times larger. Fascinating when you start to think about these kinds of